Did you know that you can germinate grass seed in both extremely low temperatures and extremely high temperatures, so long as the seed is able to stay moist? I've grown fescue from seed when overnight temperatures were getting down into the low 20s. I've also grown Kentucky bluegrass from seed in the middle of July when temperatures were up in the upper 90s. I even have an entire video here on this channel where I germinated perennial rye and grew it from seed under snow cover. I'd like to think that these are interesting facts about grass, but that's just one of a list of 15 that I have here that I want to share with you today. My name's Brian. I run the Turf Mechanic channel and the website, and I probably know too much about grass. Let's dive into the other 14 things on my list. Hopefully you'll find a lot of these things interesting. You probably also find that regular people don't know many of these things. If you've ever bought a bag of grass seed and take a look at the back of the label, you probably notice that it says something along the lines of, it requires 5 pounds per 1,000 square feet to seed a lawn, or it requires 10 pounds of seed, or it requires 3 pounds of seed. If you've ever wondered why every single bag of grass seed seems to give you a different number and every single website that you look at tends to give you a different number as well, it's because different types of grass have seed that are of different sizes. And then beyond that, certain bags of grass are coated in water retaining materials, things to help it germinate, and other bags of grass aren't. And the coating can change depending on what they coat it with or how much they coat it with. The weight of the seed changes. If seed is really fresh, it's going to weigh more than seed that's been sitting in a garage for the last 3 years. So long as that garage is dry, it's going to lose moisture within the seed and the weight is going to drop. When seeding a lawn space of any size, the pounds of seed that are needed are heavily influenced by the type of seed that you have, the freshness of the seed that you have, and whether it's coated or not. That's why it's always best to check the label of the exact bag that you're using as opposed to following a rule of thumb guide. Now, it's ironic that I say that because I do have a rule of thumb guide listed over on the Turf Mechanic website, which I've linked to down below. It's my general rule of thumb. How much grass seed do you need per 1,000 square feet, depending on the grass type that you're trying to grow? If you're ever planning on seeding, take a look at that link below and then reference the back of your own bag because that's going to be more accurate. Another little tidbit that most people don't realize or they don't really think about is when we put grass seed down and we try to grow it, it actually germinates by sending the taproot down into the ground before you ever see a blade of grass sticking up. So whenever you see reference to grass is supposed to germinate in 7 to 10 days, but yet you don't see grass on day 7, 8, 9, or 10, that doesn't mean that it hasn't germinated. So long as the taproot is going down into the area that we can't see, it has germinated. You just don't see the sprout yet. Most elementary school kids have done the science experiment of putting in a seed in a wet paper towel and stuffing it into a Ziploc bag. You can clearly see a root comes out before a shoot does every single time. And that also illustrates another point. Grass seed doesn't actually need to be touching soil to germinate. It really only needs moisture at the correct temperature. When we put grass in water and just soak it in water, there's not even a paper towel. You can get grass seed to germinate. This is the pre-germination process of seeding a lawn or seeding a bare spot. It's common practice in the golf course industry to pre-germinate seed. The problem is once there's no soil and that taproot starts sending its taproot out, if there's no soil to root into, it will dry out and die much, much faster than if it was in the soil. So if you do go down the pre-germination route, you should always expect faster grass, but more waste in the seed itself. Not all of it will root into the lawn once you put it down. This sets the stage for the next point that I want to make, or the next fact that I want to make, is the germination process starts by getting the seed wet, because getting the seed wet softens the outer shell of the seed. When that seed gets especially moist, the outer shell starts getting softer, and that jumpstarts a biological process inside the seed that culminates in the germination of the seed. You don't have to take a dry seed and put it on the ground and start watering it to get the seed to germinate. You can soften the shell ahead of time by soaking the seed in water. This is called priming the seed, but you don't need to sit it in the water until it germinates. All you need to do is soften the shell. Then you strain the seed and put it onto the ground, and it's going to sprout usually 1 to 2 to 3 days faster, depending on the variety of seed that you've sown. Now, if you are putting seed down on a very large space, it's going to make a ton of sense to use actual seed spreading equipment. But when you're only seeding a small area, especially spot seeding, just a small dead patch, you don't need any equipment to put seed down at all. Literally, just grab the seed with your hand and sprinkle it on the area. I've done this many times. It works just fine. Then you're going to grab your bag of peat, throw the peat moss on top, and you could just tamp it down with your foot. There's literally no reason to overcomplicate the process. If you're going to be seeding 5,000 square feet, then you're probably going to want equipment. But most people aren't doing that very often. Now, another thing many homeowners or lawn owners run into is they got a lawn full of weeds and not a lot of grass. So they think, I need to kill these weeds and plant new grass. Well, every bag of herbicide or every bottle of herbicides tells you to put the herbicide down, kill the weeds, and then wait a few weeks. Wait 1 to 3 weeks, depending on the herbicide that you're using, before you put seed down. That is best practice. However, you can do it all on the same day. You just won't get 100% germination on your seed. And this matters for those times when you only have a small window of opportunity to put seed down to get it to grow. If I had a bunch of weeds in this lawn and I had to get seed down in the next few days, I would spray the weeds and then put a little bit more seed down than the bag rate says that I need. I would expect some of that seed to die off, but I would also expect a majority of it to come in. Yes, it's a little bit wasteful, but it beats waiting months and months and months for the next opportunity to seed to roll around the corner. Similarly, you can actually apply Roundup or glyphosate, a non-selective weed killer, to the grass and seed at the exact same time. You can put the glyphosate down first and then put the seed down, or you can put the seed down and then spray the entire area with Roundup, with a non-selective vegetation killer. In particular, I'm talking about glyphosate here. Glyphosate does not have soil mobility. It will only absorb into the living, growing leaf material, and the seed itself isn't going to absorb it and kill the seed. By the time the grass germinates and sprouts, the glyphosate will have already killed whatever you have in your lawn off, and it will have lost its effectiveness and won't have any bearing whatsoever on the new seed. I've done this process a number of times, and I've never had any problems. It's actually quite easy to kill off a lawn and plant new seed at the same time, because the dying lawn protects the new seed, so the new seed actually grows even faster, even better. On a related note, if you do want to put seed down, especially at one of those hotter times of the year or drier times of the year, you can put down whatever seed that it is that you want and then top dress it, so to speak, with annual ryegrass. You can do this pretty much anywhere around the country. Annual ryegrass is going to germinate and start growing. You could have a thick, full lawn in less than a week with annual ryegrass. And annual ryegrass is enormously easy to kill off later on. But here's the thing. If you grow that annual ryegrass right alongside of your actual desired lawn, the ryegrass will come up and provide shade for the ultimate grass that you want. Say, for instance, a Kentucky bluegrass, which is a very slow to grow grass type from seed, or a warm season grass, or some other weird type of grass. Whatever it is that you ultimately want in your lawn, you can put annual rye on top of it and let that annual rye be the mulch, so to speak, or the protectant for the real grass that you want in your lawn. It works very effectively, and I promise you the annual ryegrass is very easy to kill off later. And in some instances, it'll just die completely on its own. Now, a common misconception in seeding lawns is that you literally need to put starter fertilizer down on the lawn at time of seeding. This is a big marketing, I don't want to call it a gimmick, but in many cases it is a gimmick. You don't need starter fertilizer at time of seeding. And that's because every seed of any plant whatsoever has all of the nutrients, all of the stuff in it that the plant needs to grow for those first few weeks. It's already in the seed. So that means if you put a seed down and it takes 10 days to germinate, and then it's got all of the nutrients that it needs for the next 3 weeks, then that means it doesn't literally need anything in the soil until 4 weeks after you put the seed on the ground. Many starter fertilizers contain fast release forms of nitrogen. And if there isn't a plant in the ground ready to use that nitrogen, then the vast majority of it is simply lost. It's lost to leaching, it's lost to the atmosphere, it's used up by weeds that are on the lawn. It's largely pointless. You should have no problems whatsoever putting grass seed down and then coming back a few weeks later to actually apply your starter fertilizer once the grass actually needs it. I also have a unique take that I truly believe in about starter fertilizers. I have an entire blog post dedicated to what I think constitutes a good starter fertilizer. It's not usually what you find in a bag at your regular store that's called starter fertilizer. Take a look at the links in the description if you want to learn more about that. Now, as for seeding at various times of the year, most people steer clear of seeding during the hottest part of the year, and then they try to seed in the early parts of spring or the mid to later parts of fall because they think that this is a better time to do it. If you really know what you're doing and you have the time and ability to do it, you can seed at any point of the year. I put seed down pretty much every month out of the year, and it's always worked out because I know what I'm doing. But what most regular people don't understand is that a baby grass sprout is actually a little bit more tolerant to heat than they realize. So if you put grass seed down on, say, July 31st, and it comes up somewhere around August 10th, it's usually pretty hot. But those sprouts are actually a little bit stronger than most people realize, and they can easily make it to the month of September. And at that point, temperatures start cooling and days are short enough that they're just going to thrive throughout the fall. Conversely, if you wait to the fall and you think, I'm going to wait till October, I'm going to be publishing this video in October, I'm going to plant my grass seed down in October and mid-fall towards Halloween, you'll still get that grass to sprout pretty easily, but it doesn't take long for overnight frosts to start happening every single night. And the grass is actually going to die easier when it is that young going into frosts than it is if you plant it in the mid part of summer when temperatures are still very hot. And the reason for that is all we need to do is put water on a summer seed. If it's really hot, a sprout can be cooled off with water and the soil can remain damp if we just give it some extra water. But there's not much that we can do about frosts. Not a lot of people go and stick heat lamps out over the top of their lawn in early November to keep their grass going. It's just less feasible. Now, as for putting seed down on the ground, if you have a larger seed, it needs to be covered up with more top dressing material. Fescue seed, for instance, is a fairly large seed. Like the physical side of the seed is large. It should be buried a little bit more with peat moss or coconut coir or seeding straw. Conversely, something like, I don't know, like a centipede seed or a Kentucky bluegrass seed, some of the many other seeds that are extremely small, they shouldn't be covered up as much. Gardeners tend to know this pretty well. You bury the seed based on the size of the seed. It's a rule of thumb that works almost all of the time. So if you are planting a fescue or something else that has a large seed, buffalo grass has a very large seed, you literally need to have more peat moss on top of it to get good, even coverage, good germination. And for all of those grass types that are spreadable, so every single warm season grass type, Kentucky bluegrass, creeping red fescue, you literally don't need to put as much seed down at time of seeding because once the grass starts growing, it will mature a little bit and then it will start spreading side to side, laterally, and it will fill in the gaps. That's why when you see on the side of a bag, it takes 5 to 10 pounds of seed. If you want full coverage as quick as possible, go for the higher rate. But if you're seeding 10,000 square feet, then the cost of seed can really go up. So I wouldn't worry too much about putting down this smaller rate. So long as you have a little bit of patience, all of that seed will germinate and then spread into the bare space or the thinner spots. Now, if you're seeding a turf-type tall fescue or a perennial rye, that's not the case. Those won't spread, so you will need to get a denser seeding there or overseed bare spots later. But there are far more spreadable grass types out there than non-spreadable or bunch-type grasses. If you do put a spreadable seed down and it looks a little bit thin after that first month, don't worry about it. Just stay on your mowing and fertilization schedule and it will fill in eventually all on its own. Now, for those warm season areas, yeah, you can put seed down. Virtually every grass type in the warm season category can be grown from seed, St. Augustine being the obvious exception. But just because you can buy seed for these lawn types, you don't actually need to. Every single warm season grass grows stolons. These are little things that sit right on top of the lawn and they grow side to side. If you pull stolons out of a thick patch of your lawn and then put them on a thin patch of your lawn and then cover them up with a little bit of dirt, they're just going to re-root down. And you're going to end up having good grass where you didn't have grass before and you didn't even put seed down. You can also buy plugs, you can buy sod, you can buy sprigs, like buy the bushel, whatever a bushel is. I would wager to say that the vast majority of new lawn scenarios in the warm season category aren't actually planted by seed. Get creative, look around. Some of these other options might make better sense for you as opposed to putting seed down. Now getting back to the cool season areas, places up north growing cool season grasses. Fescue, really talking about you fescue and your perennial rye out there. Most people in these areas that grow these grass types have been taught or they have learned over the years that you're supposed to be overseeding these things in the fall. Well, that's true, but I would really only say you need to be overseeding in the fall if your lawn is thin, because these grass types, they don't spread on their own. So over the course of time, damage happens to the lawn, die-off happens here and there, and they thin out. Adding grass seed as an overseed will thicken it back up. But that doesn't mean everyone needs to be overseeding. There are a lot of fescue and perennial rye lawns that are plenty thick. If your lawn is already thick and you're overseeding it, it's pretty much just a big wasteful use of your time and money. Only so many plants can grow in a single square foot area. And if that square foot area is thick and it's got a lot of established grass there, all of those seedlings are going to go down and compete for space that's not there. So even if they sprout, they're going to be outcompeted by the established grass that's already in the spot. It really makes very little sense to overseed a well-established thick lawn. Now, I know that was a lot, but there are so many more beginner-friendly lawn tips that I could go into that have, I guess some of them have to do with seed, but a lot of them have to do with everything else having to do with the lawn. That's why I've got an entire video about beginner-friendly lawn tips up here. If you found this video interesting, you learned some new stuff about seed, then I know that if you watch this video, you're going to learn a lot of new things that a beginner to lawn care needs to know before they start getting into the nitty-gritty, granular, advanced topics. Watch that video next.